Good afternoon. This is episode number 7 from Pathology of an Incident. I spent much time trying to figure out and what I should focus on. And the after over 1 month of my prior episode, there's no doubt that President Trump's March 4th joint address to Congress and the Columbia University and Barnard College episodes destroying and putting at harm freedom of speech, I figured that would be what I would concentrate on in today's episode number 7. Possibly the most important word here is that if you notice the first slide, it said, stop saying I didn't know. Stop saying I didn't know is possibly one of the top 2 messages that I want to leave with you today. A condition of my life was practicing to ignore gravity, to not pay attention to gravity. I've said this in prior episodes. But coming from a community that has been demonized, historically demonized, Black and Puerto Rican community in the United States, and whose demonization is in the present, gave me the only weapon that I could ever have, and was that to research, to read, to study. And I had to study a lot, and certainly one of the philosophers, great philosophers that I really gained love with, was in Plato's Republic, when I read and I learned that Plato indicated that to sketch an ideal without caring whether it is or can be realized. Again, to sketch an ideal without knowing it could be realized. That's why you can't do it with gravity. In today's environment, logic is not going to solve the problems. The logic that's given to us. In a way, in a big way, another philosopher that affected my way of thinking was Pascal. I really like Pascal's wager, this is why I say logic doesn't cut it. We need queer thinking. We need critical thinking. And let me let you know what Pascal's wager was. One of the most complicated views to think about and to prove is whether God exists or not. Is there a God? And believing in God is presumably one way to wager for God that there is a God, to bet on it, to bet that there is a God. That is the wager. This passage suggests that by striving to become a believer, even the non-believer can wager for God. A follower of Pascal might reply, the act of genuine striving already displays a pureness of heart that God would fully reward. You cannot make a mistake in believing in a God. In a God, you could only make a mistake if there isn't. So if we really do not know, believing in one is being safe. In other episodes, I've often referred to democracy in the USA as a fake orgasm. That's another wager. Bet on that. I believe that it is a fake orgasm. As with Pascal's wager, It is better to believe our democracy is fake. It's a fake orgasm because to sketch an ideal without caring whether it can be realized or not is a higher order. One mistake can you make by you cannot I'll put it in the positive. You cannot make a mistake if you believe that this democracy is a fake orgasm. There is no mistake there because we know it's not right. We know that it is not an opportunity for people to feel safe with. Our ancient society, and prior to the ancient society, we had a primitive society, but this is where logic falls apart and why the the phrase of a false democracy, of a fake orgasm, is important. And this is a part of a Marxist strand. In, in this state that we're in, and ancient history, ancient society has a white father right. A far white father right is equated with the intellectuality. It promotes economic and political developments, overthrows mother rights. A mother right, on the other hand, is equated with the sensual, the material, and the animal. That's the logic that that we have lived under for centuries. With the Colombian, the Barnard problems, let's listen and the unfortunate situation of a person being held in captive in Louisiana. Let us try to understand what I mean so far in the first few minutes.
Thank you so much, Layla. And of course, it's an honor to be here. I said this when we were preparing the event. I'm really, really flattered to be, speaking today among such incredible activists and women. I think what I share with Siwar is the moment of the revolution, and I think this is something many women in the region share. The revolutions in our region were like a moment. Of course, it depends on how old we were, but I think for many of us who were old enough to take part in the revolution, all revolutions starting in 2011. That was a moment of, as also Siwar said, like awakening moment for everything, about everything, about ourselves, about the meaning of, about the meaning of existence, and about the meaning of any action, or all actions we can or we're trying to do. And I think, for me, I grew up in a household of like, three sisters, and my family was, for so long I grew up in a quiet, open-minded, I would say, city in Syria, near the city of Hama, and my hometown is called Masyaf. It's a very diverse town, on all levels. But for so long, I think I grew up thinking that that was the norm of, everywhere in Syria, the way I was raised, the way I was empowered by my father and my mother. I thought that was the norm, and I think the revolution was also a moment of confronting the different realities in Syria, the realities of different women in different places and different backgrounds. And I think, the revolution on all levels was the moment for me, that made me think of myself as a woman who can, take action that can, contribute to changing the reality of all women and all people in the country. It was also the moment of, me, I would say, maybe like redefining, politics and political actions, and the different roles, gender roles we had in Syria, in different places. It was also a moment of, reality, because, as I said, Syria is a very, very diverse country. But we were, for so long, of dictatorship of the Assad regime, we were separated. We were forced to be separated. So we fear each other. So we don't know each other. So everyone is just everyone is just like our existence was just reduced to the daily basis survival. So, not even thinking about any political action or any political meaning. But unfortunately, also, in 2013, 2 years after the start of the Syrian revolution, my father got kidnapped or arrested by the Assad regime from Damascus, and yeah, that was also another moment that changed my life, I would say, and changed, I think, the life of my whole family in my community. But it was also a moment of um, it was a huge shift, to be honest, because a lot had to happen afterwards. My father got arrested, and we're a family of three sisters and my mother. And then I was the eldest, and I had to take care of the family. I had to arrange us fleeing the country with my sister, who was 13 at that point. And then I realized for the first time, for example, that women in Syria, mothers, were not allowed to leave the country with underage kids without the consent of the father. And in the case of the father being arrested by the authority, it was a huge challenge. It was something I didn't really know about before, and I had to learn about, and I had to confront, and I had to take action about. So we had to flee the country illegally, and then unfortunately we fled to Turkey, and then we fled with nothing, like many other families of detainees who were big number of the detainees in Syria were men. So that meant that those who were left behind were mainly women, mothers with kids, who and then women who had to take care of the kids, who had to leave the country mostly illegally, who had to leave to another, to a new country with nothing, and start from scratch, and build a new life for the kids, but still at the same time live this parallel reality of having to search for your husband, or like for your father, or for your brother, or for your relatives. And it's unfortunately, it's been a very, very difficult journey. Being just a family of three women in a new country, of course, expose you to all kind of exploitations and challenges and difficulties. I was 23 at back then. I had to work for like 19 hours to support my family financially, and still also pay money, unfortunately, to war merchants who were seeking, who were exploiting our suffering. They would come to us asking for money in exchange of information that, of course, unfortunately, were not true. But we also had to pay for that, because we could not just refuse it. So I would say, I think that was that stage after my father's disappearance shaped my vision, and the lens I used, and I still use today, to look at myself, to look at every action I do, to look at other women, and also to understand political change, and understand maybe change not only in my own country, but in the region, and in the south, in the global south, but also to understand my role as someone who comes from the global south and lives today in the global north for political reasons.
Part of the Othering and Belonging Institute. As you know, I've written a book on Another's Mind, and I specialize in a lot of the otherized processes. And certainly in these United States, we do have regimes. They're not, they're nothing but regimes. These are uh, the military uniforms, it's a three-piece suit. It's about the wealthy, about the exploitation of women. It's about the exploitation of uh, of communities that doesn't define the that doesn't define the advertisement and the propaganda that the United States is famous for putting out there. Um, Let me also add about the women that by 1622, let me give you that year again. By 1622, African American women were more valuable They worked in the fields and in the household. A Virginia company passed a law allowing them to obtain more African American women. It is often said, and I've said it in other podcasts, that these United States was built by slavery. Cotton ruled the world. And in these 50 states, it would be less violent by if we admitted that fact that slavery has defined this country, not, not, not on the side. It's defined what this country became, even the Ivy League schools. And I often think of ways in which, with all the millions and millions of slaves that came here and all the work they had to do in all kinds in all kinds of industries, that it is not far reached that I could possibly debate that this should be the United States of Africa, because without Africa, where will we be today? We would probably embrace all the otherized communities. Next slide, please. Could you go back to the prior slide? I'm sorry. Yeah. Again, the journey from slavery has always been to decolonize public space. Public space, and one of the most famous parts of the public spaces is from Rosa Parks, 1913 to 2005, in which she gave up her seat in the color section to a white passenger. Again, what the prior video was saying, that the body, understand that the body itself is resistant. We must resist the colonialism. Resistance is carried out against an established law. Those that write the definition control the results. The protester is marginalized. Columbia again, Barnard. And public space is a bus economically otherized persons have to use. The public space is what we have to use. We have to use public education. The fact, which is what I always say, the way public schools go, so will the nation. Can we see the next video, please?
I am somebody. I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be young, but I am somebody. I may be on welfare, but I am somebody. I may be small, but I am somebody. I may make a mistake, but I am somebody. My clothes are different. My face is different. My hair is different. But I am somebody. I am black, brown, white. I speak a different language, but I must be respected, protected, never rejected. I am God's child. I am somebody. Give yourself a big hand.
Thank you. That was Jesse Jackson. Those young kids that you saw there, it's things that we should be teaching. We can teach philosophy in public schools. We can teach that the facts of what slaves did in this country, not as an episode, but there is no history in the United States without admitting who built and how this country was built, created, and where was the economic engine and the brains behind all this. Recently, last week, being from Harlem, I keep track of what happened in Harlem, and we lost a blazer in Hazel Dukes, and I certainly would like not to have had this slide shown, but couldn't. I couldn't keep it out. Would have loved this woman to have lived forever, as Dr. John Hope Franklin, as other great pioneers of intelligence. And as those kids that you just saw, kids that young can read the literature written by all the black famous philosophers, Marshall and Dr. John Hope Franklin. There's so much genius in what black writers have written about James Baldwin, that when I read what a recent white person has written, I can trace the nouns and the message back to a black person who said it, who framed it differently, but whose concept is the same. We need to bring that literature into the public school system. Next slide. We go back to the beginning, the first slide. We didn't know. We must stop saying we didn't know. We've seen a few slides already, 5 slides before this, and you can see that the agony of trying to survive is not easy, especially for women. The gender issues, which comes up with Donald Trump a lot. The consequence of othering, stereotyping, gender, race, class, nation, these should be topics. Othering should be a topic in public schools, in elementary schools. And again, next slide. We didn't know. Let's go back to the blacks and women, the agony of the right to vote. The right to vote was a battle between as to who would be allowed to vote first, women or blacks. And now we have sort of that competition now between the pro-Palestinian Israel and black community, as the critics of wokeness are arguing that the conflict between Israel and Palestine differs from the conflict between white and black United States citizens. And the plight of the Palestinians and the black USA citizen is the same in a fundamental way. Both groups live under the control of a state, a regime. It is a regime that denies equal rights. Anti-wokeness crowd what this regime is trying to get across will only bring more war, more civil war, more killing. It's not going to happen. Next slide. Often history, and that's because history in this country is treated as a frill, as an obligation, but not particularly enlightening. When Donald Trump spoke, I sent out a message. I messaged out the following note. It was a racist speech. I corrected it against slavery and cotton made this nation. Trump totally ignored us, the otherized black community. Democracy is impossible if money can buy it. White nationalism was the message. Please listen to March 4th. In a way, I don't want you to listen. Listen to it. And that's exactly what I wrote, what it is. White nationalism is back. Well, it never left either. Can we see the yes, please.
You a child of God. You got purpose. The law put it there, and nobody can take it away.
These books are for white folks. They're full of things your kind wouldn't understand. You're a special boy, Nathaniel. Study hard here.
Your slaves sure do know how to behave.
Well, they God-fearing. One of them's a preacher.
People might pay good money to have them calm down a bit, especially by one of their own.
I lead you to Peter 2:18. Submit yourselves to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. I'm that. What you think you're doing, boy? I asked you a question.
You done preaching for a little while. Learned your lesson well?
Oh, yes. I've learned. To watch a strong man broken down is a terrible thing. The Lord's spoken to me. Visions of what's to come. A rise of good against evil.
What are we gonna do?
We'll fight. But once it begins, our brothers and sisters are joined. And we'll number in the hundreds, thousands even.
And we'll rise up. I like the waves. We'll rise up.
You fight.
In spite of the ache, we'll rise up.
You fight for us all.
We'll do it 1,000 times again.
I pray you sing a new song. Let the high praise of God be on the mouths of the saints and a two-edged sword in their hand to execute vengeance on the demonic nations. Sing to him a new song.
And we'll rise up. I like the waves. We'll rise up. In spite of the ache, we'll rise up. And we'll do it 1,000 times again.
You're waiting on something. You're waiting on us.
We will rise.
Wow. Birth of a Nation. Birth of a Nation was the embryo of the motion picture industry. When the picture came out in 1900, Birth of a Nation, when it was shown to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court enjoyed watching Birth of a Nation, and it speaks. It speaks so much pain. It speaks so much. If this doesn't trigger you, that we need to learn more, that this film, the Birth of a Nation, the real film, The Birth of a Nation, started the motion picture industry. Plus, it was gratified by the Supreme Court, who wanted to see it, who enjoyed it. It was sold to the Supreme Court of these United States of Africa. We know that international solidarity in the face of racism, and that's what my videos always try to bring out. And when we demonstrate and wave the Palestinian flag and chant Black Lives Matter, there's a synergy there. Black Lives Matter is the same call. The acquittal of George Zimmerman all over the world. Palestinians stand with those who mourn Trayvon Martin's death. Solid international solidarity is possible, and it will be accomplished at some point. Can we see the last video?
We are. 4 students are getting the axe. 6 organizations are getting the axe for standing up this semester and for fighting for these things. They're getting the axe not for what they did, but for what we have done. They spoke for us. They were part of us. They have been singled out, and they're going to be chopped off.
We were told the following: if President Kerr actually tried to get something more liberal out of the regents in his telephone conversations, why didn't he make some public statement to that effect? And the answer we received from a well-meaning liberal was the following. He said, would you ever imagine the manager of a firm making a statement publicly in opposition to his board of directors? That's the answer. Well, I ask you to consider, if this is affirmed, and if the Board of Regents are the Board of Directors, and if President Kerr, in fact, is the manager, then I tell you something, the faculty are a bunch of employees, and we're the raw materials. But we're a bunch of raw materials that don't mean to have any process upon us, don't mean to be made into any product, don't mean to end up being bought by some clients of the university, be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone. We're human beings. There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
So many important things to state here. The books that I have here, War Against All Puerto Ricans and Ebony and Ivy, prove, validate all the things that we need to keep learning so that we can unite. Without this type of solidarity, we're going to have regimes running this country. And these regimes are not good for our kids, and they're not going to allow the planet to last. At Columbia, I saw that I was here I lived in Harlem during the Columbia riots, 1968, and I live up here in the village of Mamaroneck. I go to Harlem a few times a month, I should say, and I pass Columbia and I attended school at Union Theological Seminary, where I just didn't ever wanted to stop learning. And the doctoral courses that I took at Union furthered my hunger for wanting to stop the pain, stop the killing for our children, and also to validate what people may say to me, which bothers me, is my opinion. It's not an opinion that blacks slaves created this country, way before the immigrants. James Baldwin, great philosophers, great black leaders and scholars, said it right when they said that the Europeans came here, those that came here because they failed where they were. And in order to succeed, they needed to do what was not ethical. They didn't need to do it, but that is the wager they made. And again, it is up to you, not me. It is up to you to find out why you may lack this curiosity. Are you afraid to find out things that you didn't want to know? I remember I was teaching at Fordham for over 20 years, let's say, and every one of my classes always started by, those of you that are here, you students that are in front of me now, do not be surprised if you talk about what happens in this class, that by the end of the semester, you will either be divorced, or who you're living with or sleeping with will change, or you will be sleeping alone. And that's what happens when you find out. Many of us are living with people. We have no idea how they think. We just know what they like to do. And if what they like to do, you also like to do, well, you think you got it made, but you don't. There's a lot more to that. So please, I want to thank you for this episode number 7. And please stop saying, I didn't know. Bye.